Hello, welcome to our webinar today on Southwest Minnesota Arts Council's Arts in the Schools grants for fiscal year 2022, which for us runs from July 1st, 2021 through June 30th, 2022. I am Carolyn Koska, the grants administrator here at Southwest Minnesota Arts Council. And first, I'll just run down what we're going to talk about today. I'll start out talking just a little bit about Southwest Minnesota Arts Council. We'll look at the guidelines for this grant program. We'll go over to our website and take a look at what resources are available for you there. Then we'll go into our grant system and run through all of the application questions that you'll need to answer. And we'll finish up talking about the grant process, or what happens after you submit an application. We will stop a couple times for questions. Feel free to enter those into the chat as you think of them, or save them for those couple of question breaks. And then at the end, if you'd like to stick around and talk more about your specific project, we can do that too. The Southwest Minnesota Arts Council, or SMOC, is a nonprofit organization committed to promoting and encouraging the development of the arts in the 18 counties of Southwest Minnesota by serving as a source of funds and technical services, which enable local organizations, educational institutions, and individuals to sponsor, create, and promote the arts in their communities. Here is our region down in the southwest corner of the state. We are one of 11 regional arts councils that cover the whole state of Minnesota. And our funding comes mostly from the state of Minnesota through an allocation from their state general fund, and also through the Arts and Cultural Heritage or Legacy Fund. We also receive funding from the McKnight Foundation that we use for some of our grants for artists, and from memberships and donations from our region. Some things that we are committed to include supporting artists and arts organizations in creating, producing, and presenting high-quality arts activities, overcoming barriers to accessing high-quality arts activities, instilling the arts into the community and public life, supporting high-quality, age-appropriate arts education for all ages to develop knowledge, skills, and understanding of the arts, and supporting events and activities that represent the diverse ethnic and cultural arts traditions of the region. So these are some things to keep in mind as you're thinking about projects you might like to do, because everything needs to ultimately relate back to these commitments. The Arts in the Schools grant program is open to public schools in our service region, which is made up of the following 18 counties: Big Stone, Chippewa, Cottonwood, Jackson, Candy, Ojai, Lac-qui-Parle, Lincoln, Lyon, McLeod, Meeker, Murray, Nobles, Pipestone, Redwood, Renville, Rock, Swift, and Yellow Medicine. We acknowledge that this region occupies the traditional, ancestral, and contemporary lands of the Dakota people. There are 4 types of projects that you can do through this grant program. Those include artist residencies, juried student art exhibits, arts field trips, and prepackaged theater experiences. And we'll talk a bit about each of those project types. For all of them, they do need to be open to all students within a grade or a subject area or activity. And they should not be for specific students who are selected by teachers or for a particular student organization. We really want them to be open to the widest group of students possible. For artist residencies, these are learning partnerships between an artist and a school, and they can involve any arts discipline. Some things your artist residency should have: a professional artist or arts organization who's going to come into your school and work with the students, a core student group receiving extended in-depth artist contact. So we want to make sure that at least some of the students at your school are getting some really in-depth time with the artist. So this might be your 4th graders are working every day for a week with the artist. So they would be your core group, and then maybe the artist does a presentation for the rest of the school. So that just kind of gives you an idea at the kind of time commitment that we're wanting students to have. You'll also need to have some artist and teacher time for planning and training. If you'd like, a part of this project can be the artist coming in and doing some training with you and your fellow teachers. You'll need to have a teacher there in the room during the artist and student contact time. And we also ask for a community component so that you're sharing this experience with the community in some way, which might look a little different right now. Next project type is our juried student art exhibits. For this project, you could, as a school or group of schools, bring in professional artists to jury a show by your students that is open to the public. Then students would have a chance to get some feedback on their work experience, what that is like, and be able to share their work with the community. This event might also include some student music performances, and grant funds for this can pay for those artists who are coming in to act as jurors, any advertising of the show in the community, awards for students, etc. And even if you are combining with another school to do a joint show, you can only ask for one grant per show. Our next project type is an arts field trip. This could include visits to artist studios, any professional performances by theater or dance or musical groups, or art galleries or museums. And there are probably some other things you could think of places to stop in an arts field trip. But that is just an overview. And then we have our prepackaged theater experiences. For this project type, the school would bring in a group like Prairie Fire or Missoula Children's Theater. There are a couple of actors from the company who come in to work with the students. They bring everything that's needed, costumes, props, and they have the whole production kind of mapped out, and you're able to put that show together in about a week. As far as how much you can request for an artist residency, you can request up to $4,000. And then for the juried art exhibit, field trip, or prepackaged theater experience, you can request up to $2,500. And no cash match is required for the artist residencies, juried art exhibits, or field trips. That means that unless your project costs more than the amount you can request, your school does not need to put any money towards the project. And for this current year, also no cash match is required for prepackaged theater projects. In the past, we have required a match for this just because schools are generally charging admission to see the show, and so they do have some money to contribute to the project. But as I said, this year that is not required. Some things to think about as far as eligibility. These are all things to be aware of. We can't pay for requests from parochial schools, payment of school personnel unless it is paying for a substitute teacher while the regular teacher is participating in the project. We can't pay for substitutions for regular school programming, including if a particular art program had been canceled in your school and you're trying to revive that through this route. We can't fund activities that take place outside of Minnesota, which you need to be aware of as you're planning field trips. You won't be able to go to Sioux Falls, for instance, even though that might be closer for some of you. We can't pay for supplies outside of what is needed for the specific project. Projects that don't have an art focus, activities for the religious socialization of the participants or audience, fundraising events, payments of debts incurred before the grant begins, grant funds being used to match another SMOC grant, and applicants with past due final reports. So make sure to also check our program guidelines that are specifically pertaining to this grant program, and also our general grant guidelines that pertain to all of our grants, just to make sure that you are aware of all of the things related to eligibility. And we'll take a look at where you can find those a little later here. You'll need to choose a start date and end date for your project. And we consider your start date to be the point at which anything in your project is getting started. So if you are starting to need to put some down payments on contracts or fees that you have, if you're ordering any supplies, holding auditions or rehearsals, or doing any advertising. You can't spend any funds before the project start date. And with that in mind, your start date should not be the date of your first event or activity. You need to give yourself time to make some of those purchases ahead of time and do any preparations that are needed. If there is something that you need to spend money on before that project start date, if the timing works out that you need to make a deposit on a contract before that date, then you cannot include that amount in your grant budget. And again, no advertising before the start date. You also need to choose a project end date, and all projects that are awarded this year must be finished up by June 30th, 2023. Here are the deadlines that we have this year. Our first round is coming up with a deadline October 6th, and the earliest your project could start is December 1st. And then our second round deadline is January 26th for projects starting March 1st or later. With this program, you need to be thinking ahead a little bit. So in the fall October deadline, you'll probably be applying for things that are happening in the spring of this year. And then in the January deadline, you'll be wanting to apply for anything happening end of the school year through next fall. And on these two deadline dates, the applications need to be submitted by 4:30 p.m. The system will not allow you to submit after that time. You'll need to have two people tied to your grant. One will be the project director, probably the teacher who is organizing this project, or possibly the grant writer. And then you'll need an authorizing official who would be the principal or superintendent or someone else from your school that has that authorizing power. And the project director and authorizing official can't be the same person. You need to have two different people filling those roles, and they will need to sign your application, your contract, and your final report. And we'll stop here for a second if there are any questions. Not hearing anything or seeing anything come through the chat, we will head over to our website. And here on our website, I'm first going to point out on our homepage, the easiest place to get to our grant system. If you scroll down below the slides, you'll see this black grants box, and there's a login button right there. So that'll be your quickest place to get into that grant system. And then I'll show you another place in a little bit here. But the next thing we're going to look at is this workshops and assistance page. This just has all the opportunities for you if you need any help with working on your grant application. We have some open office hours the second Tuesday of the month. You can stop in at our office in Marshall from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. If you'd like to bring your computer along and sit there and work on your application with us right there to ask questions, you could do that, or just come to talk through your project. So be looking out for the next date for that. Then we have a few grants Q&A sessions. We just had one a couple of weeks ago, but the next one's coming up are November 8th and January 6th. And that's just a time to get any questions answered about any of our grant programs. You can also meet with me. I am available to answer questions or talk through projects. And then finally here we have all of our webinars listed. So you can either, with some of these coming up here, register for the upcoming webinar, or if it has already passed, there are recordings available here as well. And now we're going to head over to our schools grants. And here I'm going to just point out this Compass roster of artists. We're going to head over to that site. Compass maintains a roster of teaching artists, a great resource if you're looking for someone to come into your school. So you can take a look at their artists that they have listed here. You can choose what arts discipline you might be looking at. And you've got listed the artists that are available under that art discipline. And then for each of them, you'll see they've got some information about themselves, along with the types of programs they could do coming into your community. And these are coded with different programs suited for different groups. So this is a good resource if you're thinking about doing a residency in your school, but not really knowing whom you might want to bring in. All right, so we'll go over to our actual Arts in the Schools grants page. Here's the other place I was going to show you where you can access our grant system, this Apply Now button right here. So on this page, we've got our deadlines listed along with some other important dates. And then we have some materials posted for you here. We have the guidelines for the Arts in the Schools program. We have our general grant guidelines that apply to all of our programs. We have the application questions in a Word document. Some people find it easier to work in the Word document on their draft first and then paste things into the grant system later. So if that's how you would like to work, that is available for you. We've got a budget form in a couple different formats, but we'll take a look at that in the application. The scoring criteria for this grant program, so you can see what the reviewers will be looking at as they are reading your application. Coming soon will be the final report questions in a Word document, and then we've got a couple of tutorials for using the system here. So we are going to head over to that grant system. On the login page, if you have worked in the system before, you would just go ahead and log in. If you are new to the grant system, you can create a new account here. And then if you're not sure whether you or someone else from your school already has an account here, please talk to us and we can get that figured out for you. So we are going to log in here. And if you are returning to the grant system after having worked in here before, you'll come to your dashboard. But if you are coming into the system for the first time, you'll actually be taken right to this apply page. And here we have listed all of the grants that we have currently available. You'll need to scroll through, and here's our Arts in the Schools. If you'd like to preview the application without actually starting anything, there's this preview button here. Otherwise, you can click the apply button, which is what we're going to do. I'll just point out a couple buttons at the top here. If you would like to be working in a different language, we have Google Translate embedded in the system, so you can choose another language there. It'll translate the interface and application questions for you. Then we have our copy previous answers button. If you have worked in the system before and completed other applications in here before, you can choose one of those to copy from, and it'll copy over the answers to any questions that are the same between the two applications. So that's really handy if you have a recurring project or just want to get a head start on your next application. Then we have the collaborate button. And this is a way to invite someone else to work on the application with you. You would put in their email address here and choose what level of permission you'd like to give them, and then type a message in here asking them to do whatever it is you'd like them to do. If you want them to add some information about your field trip venues or proofread the application for you. So you would just invite them through this, and they will receive an email and will just be asked to create a password to get into the system and be able to work on this application as well. Here are just a couple ways to get help as you're working on your application. If you'd like to schedule some time to meet with me, you can just click here, choose how you'd like to meet, and then you'll go right to my calendar. And then you can choose a date and time here, and that'll just set that up for us. So that's pretty easy to work, or you can email me anytime. Here is my email address. And at the top here, you'll put in a name for your project. There are some examples there. And you'll also put in the amount you are going to request, but you'll probably want to wait until you have filled out your budget form before entering that amount in here. And we've got, again, the guidelines for you here, scoring criteria, and then just some grant writing tips. I'll just touch on the tip about character limits. You'll see that the narrative fields have quite a large allowance if in case you have something you'd like to really explain in detail, but don't feel like you need to fill the text box. As long as you're addressing everything that's in the question, you may only need a few sentences or a couple paragraphs, depending on the question. So you'll start out by picking the project type you're planning to do. And there will be a few different things that will show up depending on which one you choose, mostly having to do with what kinds of work samples you may need to attach. So we're going to start out and choose artist residency, and we'll come back later and I'll show you what happens with the other ones. But you'll start out describing your project, what activities are going to take place, which students are participating, and are they in a particular school building, grade level, class subject? And then when will those activities take place? We'd really like the dates of the actual activities here. If you have a daily schedule of when particular groups of students are interacting with the artist, for instance. Then if there will be participation fees charged, how will the activity be made accessible to all of the students? And finally, talking about the community component of your project. How might the community be involved, or how might you share the project with the community? Then we have a place for you to enter your start and end dates. Then we have our budget form. We have a couple options for you. We have one in Excel, one as a PDF form, or you also have the option to create your own budget. But we're going to take a look at the Excel budget form to start with here. So you can enter the name of your school or name of the project here, and then describe what expenses you have. Let's stick a few amounts in here. And you'll see as we put those amounts in there, it is adding up for us. So let's say we just have $23.50 in expenses and we don't have anything, any income that we're putting towards the project. So we come to this little section here, which is kind of helps you figure out how much you can request. So this right here will take your cash cost minus any other funding you have. So we have $23.50. So your request cannot exceed $23.50 or the maximum request amount for this grant program, whichever is less. So we'll look here in our programs. Here's our arts in the schools. Let's say it's a residency. So $23.50 is less than $4,000. So we can request $23.50. But let's say our project is a little more expensive than that. So now we have costs of $43.50, and maybe we have a little bit that the school is contributing. So now it tells us, it takes again our cost minus the other funding, and says our request cannot exceed 4,100 or the maximum request amount. So here, 4,000 is the lesser amount. So we can request 4,000. And then if we scroll down here, we see we have a profit of minus $100. That means we have a loss, which we don't want. So we would need to either adjust expenses if we needed to, or adjust our other funding for the project. So let's say you were able to do a little bit of fundraising for that, and now we have a little more in other funding here, and our profit is 0. So you would fill out and save this form. And then you can upload that into the application here. And there's also a budget narrative field if you need to explain some things that don't actually fit within the budget spreadsheet. You can put that in here. Then we come to the section called Artistic Quality and Merit. And this is one of the questions that is specific, or question sections that is specific to the project type. So this specifically asks about the artist who is doing the residency and why did you choose them. You'll need to include a resume from them and also a sample lesson plan. It doesn't need to be a lesson plan for the particular project that they're going to be doing for you, although it can be, but it can just be a past project that they have done. Then we ask for a few samples of that artist's work. There are some parameters here for various types of samples you might attach depending on what kind of art they work in. We've also got some helpful links for if you are needing to combine multiple images or files into one PDF or resize things. So you've got a few upload fields for work samples, and then also some link fields. So if you put an address in here, it'll automatically make a link for our reviewers. Then you're asked about the impact. And first, how will the project supplement your programs rather than substituting for your regular arts programming in your school? Um, what will be that added benefit? What impact do you expect the project will have on your students? And we're looking for you to come up with a few changes that you're hoping to take place. It might be a change to the students' artistic skills, knowledge, attitudes, or behaviors. And then we ask you to think about how you could measure or prove that those changes have taken place. Um, so it says, explain how you will gather results or feedback. So you could start out having students answer a few questions about what's their experience with a particular art form, how do they feel about it, do they have any confidence in working in that particular art form? And then you could come back again after the experience and ask similar questions. So that was how you would gather results. And then what would you look for in those results that indicate success? So reading through the questionnaires, maybe you're looking for a particular difference between the before and after questionnaires. What kind of answers would tell you that this project was successful? If you have an evaluation tool you like to share here, you can upload that here. Then we just ask some questions about audience numbers and about how much time the students are spending with the artist. So in coming up with the number of hours a student would be interacting with the experience, you would take one student from your core group and add up how much time that one student would be spending interacting with the artist or experience. Then we are just collecting some data, and this doesn't really have any bearing on your application, just some information that we need to pass on to the state. We would like a list of your school board members, some demographic information, and some annual numbers about arts participation at your school. So you would, for this annual youth audience served, you would enter the total number of youth participating in arts activities that are not a part of regular curriculum. And for adults, again, those participating in arts activities not a part of regular curriculum. And then an estimated amount of annual expenses for the arts, again, not part of your regular curriculum. And again, this is just data that we are passing on. This next section is just contact information. You would enter information about for your project director, your authorizing official. Let us know who is the grant writer in case we have some questions and need to contact you, whether that's the project director, authorizing official, owner of this account, but not either of the other two, or you could enter contact information here if you're not any of these other roles. Then we just have our signatures, which are done by just typing your name in the correct box, acting as your electronic signature. And this is a great place to use that collaborate button that was at the top to invite your principal to come in here and sign, for instance. So we are going to scroll back up to the top and choose some of these other project types to see what changes. So now we're going to choose our arts field trip. And again, it's only this section on this artistic quality and merit that is going to change. So you're asked to describe the arts institutions, performances, or events you are planning to visit. Why did you choose them? And then you've got a chance to describe more about those stops that you're making on your trip with some website fields. And then we'll go back up too far again. Juried student art show. Describe the jurors, artists who will be involved in your project. Why did you choose them? What is their approach to giving feedback to students? Their resumes here, and optionally, you could put their artist website, for instance, if there's something relevant for you to enter there. And then finally, our prepackaged theater experience. Describe the theater company, which artists will actually be coming to your school if you know that, which production they will be doing, and why did you choose this particular company and production. Again, artist resumes or bios for the people who are going to actually be coming to your school, and a sample lesson plan or a production schedule from those artists, and then some samples of their work. So those are the differences you'll find depending on which project type you click on. All right, so down at the bottom here, you do have the Save Application button. It will be auto-saving as you're working, but if you come down here and click this button, and I'll also just point out you can submit right here when you're ready, but we're going to click the Save Application button. And when you do that, it will list for you all of the questions that are remaining for you to answer, so you can kind of track your progress. And if you wanted to continue working, you could click here, but we are going to go back to our dashboard. And you'll see now here is the application that we just started. And then if you want to go back in and keep working, you would just click this edit application link. And this is the same place where you would come back to on your dashboard to, if you are awarded a grant, to find your contract, your final report. All right, we are going to jump back over to our slides and stop again if there are any questions. I haven't heard or seen any questions come through, so we're going to move on. Just some tips as you are working on your application. It is a really good idea to start early just so you have plenty of time to gather everything you need. If you're still working things out for the schedule with your artist, if there are other costs you need to figure out related to supplies, things like that, just give yourself plenty of time, and also to get questions answered. Read the guidelines carefully, both the ones for this program and our general guidelines, just to make sure you're not missing anything and that you're on the right track. You saw in the application that most of the questions have multiple parts to them, so make sure you're covering all of those in your answer. You can keep your answers just clear and concise. We aren't looking for any fancy grant writing language. You can just write as if you were telling someone you know about what you're planning to do. It's also good to assume that our grant reviewers don't know anything about your school or your project, even if this is a recurring project that you have. So it helps to have someone read through your application who isn't very familiar with what you are doing. They may be able to catch some things that maybe were in your head but never made it out onto the paper. There are several ways for you to get assistance as you're working on your application. You can call us to even talk about your project before you start an application and just make sure everything is eligible, you're starting in the right grant program. And of course, you can contact us with questions anytime as you are filling out your application. And then also we can review your application for you before you submit it. If you let us know up to about 2 weeks before the deadline that you have a draft ready, we can go in there and let you know if there's anything you're missing. If you maybe need some more information in a certain question or need to come at a question in a slightly different angle. If it's closer than 2 weeks to the deadline, we can't guarantee that we're going to be able to take a look at it, but you can certainly ask. Then once you have submitted your application, we will review it for eligibility and completeness. And if we find that you are missing anything at that point, you will have 48 hours to fix that. And that's kind of, as a staff, our last interaction with your application. We don't have any say in who gets funded or not. So from there, your application will go on to a panel of individuals from around our region. They will discuss and score your application based on the criteria for this grant program, which we'll look at in a minute. And then from there, their recommendations go on to our board of directors, who will make the final funding decision based on those recommendations. So the criteria that the panel will be using to score your application include the artistic quality and merit of the project, and that is worth 18 points. The impact that this will have on the participants, which is worth 11 points, and the feasibility of the project, worth 5 points. If you follow the link to that document that was on the Arts in the Schools page or within the application, you'll see further bullet points under all of these criteria to really get a good idea of what the panel is going to be looking for. Then after the panel does their scoring, you may also be awarded 1 additional percentage point for each of the following criteria that your school might meet. If you are a first-time applicant to us, if you are led by or primarily serving BIPOC or LGBTQ communities or people with disabilities, or if you are from a county that has received fewer grants from us recently. If your grant is awarded, you'll need to complete a contract. And then after your contract, you will receive 80% of your grant award around the time of your start date. Then you'll receive the remaining 20% after your project and your final report are completed. You'll need to acknowledge the grant on any marketing that or publicity that you're doing about the project. There'll be a credit line included in your grant contract that you'll need to use. And you may also need to use this Minnesota Legacy logo, depending on the source of funds you are awarded. But we will send all of that to you, the credit line, logos, posters, so you won't have to guess which ones you'll need to use for your project. You'll need to do a final report within 60 days after the end of your project. And it's a good idea to take a look through the report just when you're starting your project, so you know what kinds of information you'll need to gather, especially related to your outcomes. Also, we expect that you will spend what you said in your application budget. This is not the time after you've been awarded the grant to be looking for ways to save money. We do need you to spend out that entire amount of your grant. But if it looks like there's something in your project that's going to need to change, please contact us and we can get those changes approved for you in advance. So that was it for our Arts in the Schools grants. I just wanted to talk about one other opportunity that we have coming up. This is our art study opportunity for youth grants, and this will provide up to $500 to allow young artists grades 5 through 12 to attend a special arts study. We have one deadline per year for this program. This year, that will be March 30th, and you can learn more at our webinar on February 15th. And here are just a few more ways to contact us. I will stick around in case there is anything someone would like to talk about, but otherwise, thanks for joining us today, and we hope to hear from you.